Hello and welcome to The Magic in You, where I am here with best-selling author Theresa Crater, who has written compelling supernatural, suspense, and paranormal women's fiction. Her series include the Spirit Springs and Emerald City Paranoid Fiction series, the award-winning Power Places Supernatural Suspense series, and also the Mystic Assassin series. She has also published individual novels, short stories, and a spiritual memoir, which is sort of the story behind the stories that she has
Mhm.
written. And all of these
Yes.
books can be found on the website below, which will give you a direct link to these. And Teresa can be found, she lives in Boulder, Colorado in the USA with an Egyptologist, Stephen Mailer, who, if you have been following my channel, he appeared for my last conference, Return to the Mother, and he will be part of my next upcoming conference in August, which is Reawakening the Sacred Self. And they also reside with their cat, aptly named Cleo. So, Teresa, I'm just going to sort of share our screen, bringing you on board and welcoming you officially to thank you to talk about the magic in you.
Thank you.
So, why don't we start for people who may not know much about you, which is a bit shameful because you've written so many books, but
Oh.
can we start talking about, say, your spiritual path, what got you started on it, and how did this, if it did, sort of influence your writing as well?
Okay, great. It's kind of hard to know exactly where to start. I was born into a family that had a little bit of a psychic gift. So my mother accepted this, being psychic when I was a child. And so this was sort of normal. But when I was a teenager, I'm of the age that I was a Beatles fan. And when the Beatles started meditating, I got interested. I bought the long playing LP album that had the Beatles on one side and their meditation teacher, Marishi, on the other side. And I used to listen to it. And I would sit in the chair and close my eyes. And I thought that was what transcendental meditation was. This was when I was 16. But when I got to college, I was properly taught meditation. And I was really hooked from then on. I had a wonderful experience that first time. And we went to all the events and we became the center, sort of. We organized. And later on, I went to be on to teacher training and became a meditation teacher. And that was difficult in a way because I wrote about this in Three Awakenings. I'm bisexual. I was living with a woman at the time, and the TM movement didn't approve of this. I'd never had any trouble in my home state, but when I got there, there was a lot of problems. And so that was my first sort of rough awakening to that sometimes spiritual groups are not all they're cracked up to be, shall we say. And I learned a little discernment, maybe. All my life, I have been studying this and that and the other thing. Um, it's kind of a joke. A friend of mine who's started a whole sort of new kind of meditation technique has jokes that we got Saraswati mantras when we were young. And Saraswati is, knowledge. And she has now like three PhDs, and I have a whole bunch. And we're joking that we may have overdone it on that Saraswati mantra. But all my life, I've studied various and sundry, and not just studied, but participated in a lot of different spiritual traditions. So I've studied, uh, I took Reiki, became a Reiki master, studied shamanism with a Cheyenne teacher who was actually Hopi trained, which was unusual. And then always been attracted to, I think, maybe, I don't know, we seem to have a home spiritual tradition. And I've always been pulled into the Arthurian mysteries and Wicca, witchcraft, the Western metaphysical traditions, and studied a few of those too and participated in them. So I may have left a couple things out, but how has that all gone into my fiction is I really think I use my own experiences at the sites and, meditating, and also the knowledge that I've learned studying these different traditions with indigenous teachers and other people, and um, always ask permission if I use anybody else's experience on a tour, but I just weave these into the story. I think what I really write is called visionary fiction. But that's not a genre that gets a lot of attention, right? In on Amazon or elsewhere. And so I usually urban fantasy or supernatural suspense, but it's always integrating a real spiritual tradition, real spiritual experiences, real spiritual teachings into a story. So people are entertained while they're reading something that they might be familiar with already. And I get little emails like, you really know your magic, and I'm like, oh, thanks. That's so good to hear. Or they're learning something as they're going along.
Mm. Excuse me. Thank you very much
Yeah.
for sharing. It sounds really exciting. And you did sort of touch on about meditating in sites, and you are quite extensively traveled around the world. You've been to Egypt more times than I've been. I've been once. You've been there 5 times, and it does help when
Yes, but
your partner is an Egyptologist as well.
yes, I haven't matched his 23 yet, but
It's still time. But you've also been to Scotland and England and Peru and Bolivia, also Cambodia and the Madeleine countries with author Kathleen McGowan. So, and she wrote about the Madeleine trilogy that you've sort of also have written your own version, or that's sort of been weaving through some of your books as well. So and I
Mhm.
noticed today there's more and more interest in the Magdalene line, or the teachings of Mary Magdalene. So, what is your take? What did you come back from visiting the Magdalene countries?
Oh my goodness. It was just incredible. It was really wonderful. I mean, Kathleen really knows her stuff. I mean, she studied uh, that tradition, Mary Magdalene, as long as Steve has studied Egypt. I mean, they're like both scholars. And she really took us around. I loved going to the sites. There was one particular site that I had an experience of higher state of consciousness in. It was a complete surprise. It was an old Templar tower. It's a little bit out in the countryside. It's a little far away from some of the other sites. And she talked about her own experience there, how she had met her teacher there, her teacher who is actually somebody who is probably not really incarnated now, but appeared to her as a physical being and talked to her at that site. So this is an extremely magical site. And as she was telling us this story, I kept feeling this pull to go around the tower and sit on the western side of it. And I finally just gave in. I thought, okay, I don't want to be rude, but I went around to the side. And as soon as I walked there, it just hit me. It was like my heart just opened up. And there was a part of me that could have resisted it, which I found interesting. I had to say to myself, it's okay just to let go. And I did. And as soon as I did, all of this divine energy, this light just came rushing in. And oftentimes, when I have an experience like that, I said often, I don't have them that often, really. One can hope, right? Um, I, it's like a cleansing. It's like this, all of this, the wounds that we still have, might still have a little bit, the pain, and mostly that feeling of separation that we live with all the time. That separation from our divine self. We know it's there intellectually. We get glimpses of it. When it comes rushing in that fullness, it's like I just went to the corner of the site and cried my eyes out for a while. And there was a woman who was having a somewhat similar experience walking behind me, and she was sort of walking, sort of protecting me until I kind of got myself together. And it was amazing. I looked out at the valley that all of those sites are in. And if you've read some, you know that they're all connected in terms of sacred geometry. They're placed in a way that creates sacred lines, or the sacred lines are already there, and the people placed to those old sites on those PowerPoints. And I felt the whole energetics of that valley. That valley is very, very powerful. Um, and we got to see where the Magdalene herself is buried. She is actually there. I've forgotten the name of the town. I could look it up for you later. I apologize. But we went into her crypt, and while Kathleen was talking, you can tell me when to stop if you want to switch topics. But while Kathleen was talking about this basilica where she is buried, I could feel her. I could feel her pregnant belly pushing up against me, and I was thinking, oh God, what's happening here? It was just astonishing. It really was. We also went to Martha's Basilica, where she is buried, and there was a psychic there with me, and we were both sitting in front of where her tomb, and she looked at me, I looked at her, and we both said, she can't believe they built this fancy cathedral on top of her simple little house, because she's feeling like we had a simple message. We had a simple message of enlightenment and love. And look what they've done. And she said, so much dusting. It was like, because she was the housewife. She was the one who took care of everybody. And she has to now, she feels like, why do they build all this stuff? I have to clean it. It's like they made this fancy, elaborate thing out of a simple message, which I
Mm.
thought really spoke
Yeah.
to what's happened to the spiritual teachings of that group of people.
Well, and I think also everywhere people are sort of like elaborating, adding, I suppose it's if we sort of tie in Stephen's interest in ancient Egypt, building upon the original teachings, but in doing that, they're becoming more and more distorted as well. And
It's
it's
true.
almost
Yes.
needing to come back to as you said, the original teachings, the original sacred site, the original place where not only Martha or Mary Magdalene, but any spiritual guru or awakening place was. It's like come back to the core essence there.
Yes.
Wow.
There are some people who talk about how people get involved in cults and how people get kind of trapped in cults, and especially spiritual teachers. And they said that in order to keep people in the group, there has to be this anticipation that there's more to be revealed. There's more coming, and that's where that elaboration comes from. I thought that was an interesting idea.
And as you mentioned earlier, you sort of were sort of that came to the forefront for you personally with the transcendental meditation when you sort of moved and sort of another aspect, shall we say, got sort of brought into your awareness that maybe it wasn't.
Yes,
But then we all do have to go through these experiences as well.
we
On a
do.
certain level, it's all right listening to other people sort of warning us, don't do this, don't do that. But it's almost like for our own sort of spiritual growth, we do have to go through the lesson ourselves. We can't keep just leading or living through other people's experience as well.
We do. And you know, when it first happened to me, they said you can't become a teacher. And it felt to you have to either leave this relationship or you can be a teacher, one or the other. And to me, that was like being told you can either breathe or you can eat, but you have to pick. I mean, that's how much I was, you know, tied into it. But my friend Julie Lohr has written a book, Symbol and Synchronicity, which I think is very brilliant. And she quoted, I think it was either Jung or Rumi, but I don't know who said, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But there's actually a second line to that that I wasn't aware of. It says, when the student is really ready, the teacher disappears. Which I thought was really interesting. I thought, well, yes. I mean, there is a point in our spiritual growth where we can become self-sufficient. We hear what the teacher's offering, or we read a book, and we take what works. It's like a AA meeting, I guess. I don't know.
We
You
need
take,
to take that information and then embody it and then put it to use, basically.
yes, yes, and
Yeah,
we don't just
become
accept
it.
it wholesale. We see what works for us.
No, no, wonderful, wonderful. Especially, I think these are probably important flags or things to keep in mind, especially in today's modern era where
Oh, gosh,
I
yes.
mean I know yeah we've had interesting characters in the past, but in this day and age, especially largely due to social media, and it's just so quickly for people to become instant experts. I see that like in Reiki. I don't know if it's the same in the States, but in a weekend you can go from Reiki 1, Reiki 2, and next weekend become your masters. And I'm just sitting there going, how? But it's
Mhm.
it's
Yes.
the embodiment of the teachings, and it can take years, if not decades, to actually move through those different levels of a true
It's
initiation.
true. There would always be somebody on one of Steve's tours who just learned about Egypt. They followed him around Egypt once. And then in a year, they were offering their own tours. They'd never, and you know, they didn't come to the realization that Steve has studied, I think now up to 50 years, but then it would have been 40 maybe. And, you know, was like, okay, you're an instant expert now. Maybe not.
Yes, yes. Probably best not to go down that rabbit hole because we could be there for a long, long time. But I want
Yes,
to
we could.
back and talk about your books because you've just published the first novel of your new fantasy series that you've been wanting to write
Yes.
for a long time, which is, if I understand correctly, The Crone and the Stolen Orb. Sounds really intriguing. Sounds very witchy. I really hate that word, but these days everything's sort of witchy. But can you tell us a
Well,
little bit
go
about
ahead.
this book and what sort of like what's the backstory to it?
Oh, well, the backstory is really pagan Europe. You know, it's all the traditions that have sprung from up again, you know, um, that one of the things that Maharishi said, which actually is true, I think, he said, we're going to start, all of the old spiritual teachings are going to start to rise up again and be renewed until we work our way back to the original teachings. And I don't know that we have, but certainly in Europe, after that long history of well, what are you going to call the witch burnings, you know, and that repression of the indigenous traditions of Europe, it's all coming back. It's all raising back up to the fore. I mean, now we have kids who've been raised in that tradition, and that's normal to them, which I think is fantastic. And so that's what this is about. It's I have an older character whose wife has she's a lesbian, her wife has died, and she's grieving and she doesn't feel like there's much left until she goes walking in the woods and accidentally slips into fairy. And the king of the high fae welcome her into a circle, and there's an orb sitting in the middle of this circle, and he says, in this one's time, this orb is missing. And he gives her the job of finding it again. And he reminds her that she made this promise to him thousands of years ago. And she's thinking, what? I'm just an ordinary person, thousands of years ago. What are you talking? I don't remember this. And so that's the basis of the story. And she doesn't necessarily finish her task in this first novel. She's interrupted, by a dark magician who gets taken over by a fallen angel. And one of the things I love about writing this is that it surprised me. One of the experiences I'd had of meeting a fallen angel in a meditation came rushing back, and it informed a lot of how the book ended. But it was interesting in that meditation. It was when I was studying shamanism. This fallen angel looked at me and he said, "You're scared of me?" He said, and he said, "What do you're really not quite as you haven't thrown off the shackles of your I forget the word. You've been taught to fear me, and you think you have unlearned that, but look at you right now. You haven't, have you?" And I was sort of like, okie dokie. And I learned a little bit about some of the fallen angels in that tradition, and in the Western metaphysical schools, which come from Egypt. There is a teaching that this was a willing sacrifice. So I don't know. For me, the Western metaphysical schools, which go back to Egypt, are intertwined with, the witchy traditions, which are more, I think, the indigenous people, the herbs, the stars, the stones, of Europe. So all of that is in that book. I really had fun. And one of the things I really love about it is I made a magical town where we would all want to live, I think. I know I do. And one of my beta readers said, I want to live in this town. It's called Spirit Springs. And of course, everybody is pagan, is magical, has some magical tradition that they study. They don't all agree. They don't all think the same. But, they basically get along, except, there's human squabbles here and there. And they're connected with the magical beings in the mountains and with the sacred springs that are around them. The book opens with Riley, who is the main character, giving offerings to the fairies at one of the sacred springs. And everybody in town does that. I think I want to move there. If you know of such a place, let me know.
Maybe on the other page.
Maybe so.
And the way that, our world, or how we're treating our world these days, it's just like, yes, I think that it'll grow tremendously if there is such a place there. But then I suppose it could also be our goal to sort of create that vision that you have here.
That would be fun. Maybe Glastonbury is close, but
maybe, yes, because it's got a very strong connection with the Bay. So you've had a very sort of like interesting life, very spiritual life. You've traveled a lot. Your books sort of reflect all that as well. And this is one question that I ask some of the people I've been chatting with, because we're going through very sort of changeable times, and sometimes, especially when we follow a more sort of alternative spiritual or religious path, compared to orthodox religions where they do have a more of a tight-knit supportive community, I do find, even from my own personal experience, that some of our more alternative pagan paths, we don't tend to have that strong underpinning when things sort of start going a little bit dark for us, and often we find ourselves sort of on our own or questioning, doing big deep dives as to who we are, why we're here, why we're going through this stuff, which
Oh
could
boy,
either
yeah.
make or break us, really, I guess. For mine, it actually strengthened my belief in what I believed in. I'm just wondering if you've gone through a similar situation, and if so, has your own beliefs sort of supported or helped you sort of move through those dark times, but like the Tower card and coming out the other.
You know, that tower card is interesting because metaphysically, it is an image of the light coming down through the body and going all the way through. And of course, in the process of that, it knocks all the BS out of us, you know, which is not always fun. I can say that you keep me on track. I don't want to go too far, but I can say that I would say in the last like 5 years ago, I commented that I had sort of lost the map. I came in, I knew our generation had come in to bring the light. At least a bunch of us, you know, maybe we fell off the path, but you know, some of us, but anyway, we came and they sent a whole bunch of us just in case we fell off the path. But I felt like I knew intuitively what was happening, but then I kind of lost the map. I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen now. And then I have to say, I don't want to get into politics, but I can say that on November 6th, I had the deepest dark night of the soul that I have had ever. Maybe. I mean, except when my family traumas rose up and I realized, oh, I'm going to have to clear this. And I didn't even know they were there, you know, but I did. I did that work. Um, but that day, I felt like we had failed. You know, I did. I felt like we'd failed. And I just thought, well, what's the point? And I have some friends, two friends who are very high. One is a very high spiritual sound teacher who told me, I'm not incarnating on this planet anymore. He said, and I was thinking, okay, well, all right, that's your choice, right? But it was a really dark time, and I just felt like, well, I don't know. I just don't know. Look at this mess, you know, and what are we going to do? And we haven't done what we came here to do. But now I don't feel that way. These little glimmers of hope have come through. People have said, you know, the astrology is fantastic for this period of time. So I don't know how these two things match each other, right? I feel like a bipolar person, although not technically, you know, it's like I have this visionary feeling of hope. And then I look at the world and I think, I have no idea how this is all going to work itself out. I feel like a spectator, you know, I'm just watching. But the thing about it, my friend Tom Kenyon, who is a sound healer, and we went to college together. We started meditating together. Then we split off, you know, in our lives. And now I have seen he's just become this amazing person. Um, you know, he said, when you get to a point where really dark things are happening or something tragic has happened to you. Maybe your house burned down in the Los Angeles fire. I know Australia has had terrible fires. Maybe you lost everything. He said, adopt an attitude of curiosity. Just watch and be curious about what's going to come. And remember those visions that you've had and wait for them to come. So we'll see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe we won't see. Maybe, I mean, I'm 74, Steve is going to 79. Maybe we won't see, but we will see some progress. Maybe it will suddenly switch. Some people
Yeah,
say,
yeah, I can definitely sort of resonate with what you're saying. I think the whole world kind of, we were holding our breath, going to go, what's going to happen? Because there's the flow-on effect. And here in Australia, we're seeing of the flow-on effect as well. The world's no longer as isolated as it was.
oh,
But
for sure.
But as you said, yeah, there's almost like this sort of split. It's almost like the last of the. See what's happened in America, almost like sort of, we're moving into the big talk about Uranus, how it sort of shakes things up, the unexpected. But it's almost like it's needed to shake things up to get that last bit out to really bring that to the surface. We've had to go
Yeah.
why we have to go through it twice. It's beyond me. Maybe we didn't learn the first time around.
Excuse me, didn't we do this already?
It's here
I
again.
know.
It's almost like we sort of if we're using metaphysical talk, we sunk really deep, and for
Yeah.
light to I love the Buddhist analogy of the muddy glass and the lotus coming up. It's almost
Mm,
like the mud that settled turned into clay, and it needed to be another shake up for the lotus to emerge.
maybe so. Do we have another minute for me to say just one
Yeah.
more thing? I'm sorry to run on, but
No.
well, another astrologer was saying this is an existential grip. It's like patriarchy is trying is it's like its last desperate effort to survive, and yet it is already dead. It's already dead, but it's trying. It's like a desperate clawing to survive. And I can tell you that in the States, people who wanted to go backwards and say, well, let's have the old times back again, are now getting hit by certain changes that are happening. They're losing their jobs. They're losing grants that they were working on. Um, 80,000 veteran affairs people have just been lost their jobs, half of them veterans. Many of them supported this change, but now they're going, but wait a minute. And apparently there are people calling in, excuse me for going here, but I hope we don't offend many of your viewers, but they're calling into right-wing talk shows and saying, look, I lost my job. Please tell somebody in the administration that this is a mistake. Surely this isn't what they intended. And many of us are going, excuse us, didn't you understand what we said to you? Didn't you hear it? You didn't hear it, did you? Okay, we're just going to step back and let you see what's going to happen.
And it's almost like that pendulum has had to swing. And you did mention the end of the patriarchy, and I think this is also another level to it, is that we've been entrenched as to the patriarchal means anti-men, and it's just like, no, it doesn't. It's a way of thinking. It's this sort of like this climbing up so there can only be one, not necessarily like communism with the sharing of all, but for everyone.
Right,
It's just like there's more of a distribution where we sort of like help everybody up as well.
right.
And there is that sort of reawakening and sort of going, oh, this is what you said people have been sort of talking about for
Yes, there's
decades.
the divine feminine is rising, but also the divine masculine,
Mm.
which is different than the toxic masculine, which has been, and no man really enjoys that. I don't think. I think there is pain associated
Yeah.
with it.
Well, yeah. And but it's almost like, as you were saying, it's almost like an animal being backed into the corner and it's its last sort of hurrah before
Right.
it sort of dissolves. And it's like, even if that's not the case, it gives us hope. Really,
Yes, it does.
gives us a lot of hope. We're out there with our vision boards or whatever we do, clutching our crystals and praying at the moon, dancing under the solar circles. It's sort of like giving us hope that, and also that sort of momentum that as a species, it's more than just
Yes.
the individual. It's wider than us.
Plus, we keep teaching. We keep speaking this idea. We keep speaking this history, this alternative history of the matriarchy, of paganism, of indigenous wisdom. And because we keep speaking it, some of the next generation hears it. And then they pass it on too. And no matter when the light comes, we're keeping that tradition alive.
Yeah. And this is something like coming back to the work that you're doing through your stories. this is such an ancient technique. As human beings, we have always told stories. We've,
Yes.
and some cultures have been, like in ancient Egypt, have put the stories onto the walls. But
Yes.
we've always sort of, it's the oral tradition or it's the written tradition, but this is telling us that there is hope, that if we bring it into ancient Egypt, this is, we'll get everything's cyclic and we will rise again, the light will come again. And as with your new stories, we are all sort of like the crone searching for that orb, and that orb could be the light within our own selves. What are we
Oh, yes.
bringing forward to the
It's
world?
the orb that brings balance to all the worlds.
Mm, yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. So, Theresa, we are unfortunately running out of time. I just want to sort of like wrap up and just say, is there anything today in the life that you've lived, in all the adventures and the writings and the meditations and the studies that you have done, that you sort of wished that you knew right at the beginning when you first put your step foot on this long path that you've had, with gained all this knowledge that you've shared with us in your writings?
Okay, I don't know what to say really. Well, the first thing I wish I had known was that when Marshy told me to be celibate, I wish I had known he wasn't following his own advice. And so I know this is not what you were looking for. I wish I had known to trust myself more. I wish I had known it was safe to face my deepest fears. You know, there's a Silmuth Wolfing painting. I don't know if you know her. She was a German mystical painting of a little girl almost facing this enormous dragon that's breathing fire at her. Well, that dragon is the key to your deepest spiritual knowledge. It's it to and your experiences. We have to face our pain. It's not going to kill us. It will strengthen us. It will make us who we were when we came into this life and who we're supposed to be. Is that
No, no,
hopeful
that's
enough?
perfect. I think as we are going through these times of change, I think we all are needing to sort of not only face but also tame the dragon that's breathing. It's fire. Fire is
Yes.
transformation and change anyway. So that's
Make that
fantastic.
dragon our friend.
Engulf the dragon, become the dragon.
Become the dragon. Yes, we need some more dragon crones around.
That could be dangerous. So I'm going to have to wrap this up, but it's been an absolute delight talking with you, Theresa. Thank
It's
you very
wonderful talking
much.
to you.
And
Thank
for,
you. Thank
and
you.
for everybody else who's wanting to sort of find out more about your work and your books, all the links will be listed below. So once again, thank you for talking about the magic in you.
Thank you.